smaller communities. It always seems that most of the economic development efforts are always towards Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, the major communities. What would you do to stimulate growth in some of the other areas?
Exactly what I just said. I mean, I think it depends on. I do think that I've heard that complaint consistently. When I talk to chambers of commerce in small towns, or if I talk to township trustees, or if I talk to mayors or council people, or even county commissioners in smaller counties, they're just not seeing a real partnership in terms of what are the local opportunities. They're just not seeing it. You have to build that into your system. If you're looking for big headlines and quick wins in big media markets, you're just not going to do that. And if you look at, I'd encourage people here, look at the headlines or look at the press releases that have come out of JobsOhio in the last year. Almost all of it is about big projects in big markets. If you look at what we've done in Cuyahoga County, we have 11 separate sub-funds. So we have a $100 million program with 11 separate sub-funds. And one of those funds specifically, actually a couple of the funds specifically are aimed towards very small businesses, even to the point of microloans. There's no reason why JobsOhio couldn't do the same thing. They may say they do that, but I think if you asked local leadership in smaller communities in Ohio, they would say they don't appear to be on the radar screen. So when you develop your programs, a significant part of those economic development loan programs should be specifically targeted towards smaller communities. I think that the greatest, I didn't mention what I think really the biggest issue, because I think it's in Ohio, and I think in this election. Because I think it will be a consistent theme through almost anything we talk about, whether it's education policy or economic development or law enforcement or almost anything else, is our smaller communities in Ohio being basically left to sink or swim on their own, and actually are being more of the burden is being shoveled down to them, and that's what I do believe is happening. I think that's happening with property taxes. I think it's happening with education policy. I think it's also reflected. The same philosophy is consistent with economic development programs. You have to build it in. If you just empower the JobsOhio board and say, go out there and create as many jobs as you possibly can and see what happens. If you look at the leadership even in JobsOhio, you're going to find people that don't have a lot of expertise with what I would call Main Street development. One of the advantages, Governor Kasich and I, we have some things in common. We have some real differences, and one of the differences between us that I think might be instructive is where we came out of in terms of our government experience. I came out of a local government background. I was a local councilman in a city of 50,000, which is bigger than most places in Ohio. But we had pretty small town concerns. So we had one of the things I did as mayor of Lakewood was we had a local place-based economic development strategy, which was actually based on kind of a national model called Main Street. It's a Main Street, it actually was done in the city of Worcester as well. And we actually came down, when we started our program in Lakewood, which was around 2007, 2008, because our commercial areas had been really in a slump for a long time. It was affecting our local economy. We actually did a site visit, came down to Worcester and see how they had invigorated their downtown. If you go to Lakewood today, by almost any objective measure, whether it's retail occupancy or local employment, it's doing better than it was 5 or 6 years ago. I'm proud that I came out of that kind of background. Governor Kasich's government background has overwhelmingly been as a congressman. And I just don't believe he ever had that background that I did, where you're meeting with local chambers of commerce and local small business people and saying, what are some small things that we can do? May not make a big headline sometimes, but what are some small things that we can do to make it easier for you to thrive?